Imagine a billionaire CEO, a lonely orphan girl, and a secret that could change everything. James Mallory thought he was saving her, giving her a new life in his world of wealth and luxury. But the moment she stepped into his mansion, everything began to unravel. A name whispered in the dark, a forgotten family, and a fortune long thought lost. Now someone is hunting her, determined to erase her past for good. Who is this girl, really? And what deadly forces are lurking in the shadows, ready to destroy everything she's inherited? Stay tuned, because this story is about to take a turn you won't believe. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. James Mallory sat by the window in his penthouse, his gaze fixed on the bustling city below. It was a view many would envy. Tall skyscrapers, luxury cars zipping by, and the twinkling lights of the city that never slept. Yet despite all the wealth and success, James felt an emptiness gnawing at him. He had built his empire from the ground up, becoming the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country. But what did it all mean if there was no one to share it with? His life had become a carefully constructed routine. Wake up, work, attend meetings, and repeat. Everything was predictable. Everything except for the gnawing feeling that something was missing. James had everything a man could desire: money, fame, and power. But there was a void inside him, a void that no amount of money could fill. Tonight was supposed to be like any other, a charity gala he felt obligated to attend. James rarely got involved in charity work, not out of spite, but because it just didn't fit into his world. He was a businessman, not a philanthropist. Yet tonight, something felt different. There was a pull, an invisible thread tugging at his heart, urging him to go. As he entered the grand ballroom of the gala, the lights dazzled and the soft hum of voices filled the air. Elegantly dressed people mingled, exchanging business cards and laughing. James made his way through the crowd, nodding politely to familiar faces, when his eyes landed on something, or rather someone, that caught him completely off guard. At the edge of the room, away from the chatter and clinking glasses, stood an elderly woman talking to a group of children. James couldn't help but notice one girl who stood out among them. She was quiet, her big brown eyes scanning the room, not in excitement, but in a way that suggested a deep sadness. She didn't belong to the vibrant world around her. She was different, fragile. The woman noticed his gaze and smiled warmly. "That's Emma," she said softly. "She's been in the orphanage since she was a baby. Never adopted. She's a special one." James blinked, not sure why he was so drawn to her. He had never considered adoption before. His life was too structured for the unpredictability that came with children. Yet something in the way Emma stood, so alone yet so strong, stirred something inside him. Why hasn't anyone adopted her? He found himself asking without thinking. The director of the orphanage hesitated. "Some children, they just don't fit anywhere. Emma's a bit different, but she's kind, intelligent, she just needs someone who sees her." James stared at Emma, her eyes locked on his, as if she was sizing him up. For a moment he wondered if he was imagining the connection between them. He had no reason to feel this way. He had never wanted to be a father. His life was his business, his empire. Yet the more he looked at Emma, the more he felt like he was seeing himself in her, lonely, out of place. Someone who needed more than just wealth to feel whole. Before he even understood what he was doing, the words left his mouth. "I want to adopt her." The director's eyes widened in surprise, and the room around them seemed to fall silent. A billionaire adopting a poor orphan girl? It was unheard of. People whispered, casting curious glances, but James didn't care. He had made up his mind. Emma didn't react the way he expected. She didn't leap into his arms or smile with joy. Instead, she just stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, James felt a twinge of doubt. Maybe he had made a mistake. Maybe this was too much. But then Emma spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes searching his. James was taken aback. It wasn't just a question, it was a test. She was testing him, trying to see if he truly understood what he was asking. And for the first time in a long time, James knew, deep down, that he was sure about this decision, sure about adopting her. Yes, he replied, his voice firm. The room seemed to exhale in collective disbelief, but Emma just nodded, her gaze still fixed on him. There was no joy in her eyes, no excitement, only a quiet acceptance, as if she had already seen the future and knew it was inevitable. Within weeks, the adoption process moved forward, thanks to James's influence. Emma stepped into his mansion, a place so grand it barely felt real. Chandeliers hung from high ceilings, marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of the lights, and the air was heavy with the scent of wealth. Yet Emma barely reacted. She didn't look around in awe, didn't ask questions. She simply walked through the halls as if she had been there before. James had expected her to be overwhelmed by the luxury, but instead she remained distant, cold even. She didn't seem to care about the beauty of the mansion or the fine meals prepared by world-class chefs. She simply observed, her quiet presence unsettling James. That night, as they sat down for dinner, James tried to break the silence. "You can order anything you like," he said, trying to make her feel comfortable. "The chef can make anything you want." Emma looked at him, her eyes scanning his face, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then she spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Anything? Anything," James replied, his voice a little firmer this time. There was a long pause, and then Emma's eyes softened. "A peanut butter and jelly sandwich." James blinked, taken aback. He had expected her to choose something extravagant, something that matched the grandeur of the house. But she chose the simplest meal possible. Without questioning her, he nodded. And moments later, the chef presented the most elegant peanut butter and jelly sandwich James had ever seen. Emma took a bite, then another, and James watched in silence as tears began to roll down her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly, but not before James noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked, leaning forward, his concern evident. "Nothing," she said, her voice barely audible. "It just tastes like home." Home? James's heart skipped a beat. She had lived in an orphanage her whole life. What home was she talking about? He didn't ask more questions, but as the night went on, the unease in his chest only grew. There was something about Emma that didn't add up, something deep and unspoken, and James was determined to figure it out. In the days that followed, James Mallory found himself constantly questioning his decision. Emma's behavior was unlike anything he had expected from a child. She wasn't eager to explore the luxury of her new home, nor did she show excitement at the chance to live in a mansion. It was as if she had lived in a world of her own, one that didn't involve the indulgence of wealth or the pleasures of a carefree childhood. Emma was not like the other children James had heard about, the ones who would jump at the chance to live in such a lavish place. She was different, and it troubled him. As he watched her from afar, he began to notice the subtle ways she observed everything around her. When she would walk through the mansion, her eyes would move slowly, taking in every detail, as though she was memorizing the layout. Her gaze would linger on the smallest things, the patterns on the carpets, the way the chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the polished surfaces of the furniture. At first, James thought it was just curiosity, but there was something unsettling about the way she studied everything. It wasn't the wonder of a child exploring a new world. It was something else. It was the gaze of someone who had been taught to watch carefully, to analyze every detail. On the second evening after she arrived, James sat with her at dinner again, trying to make conversation, to connect with her. The house was silent, save for the clink of silverware against plates as they ate together. The room, with its high ceilings and luxurious decor, felt suddenly too large, too cold for the two of them. James had always enjoyed solitude, but tonight, it felt lonely. Emma sat across from him, picking at her food, her expression distant. Her plate was full, but she didn't seem to be interested in the gourmet meals that had been prepared. "Emma, is everything all right?" James asked, trying to break the silence. He had to admit he felt awkward. She had been living with him for a few days now, and he couldn't understand why she seemed so uncomfortable, so detached. She glanced up from her plate, her big brown eyes locking with his. There was no warmth in them, no childlike innocence. They were cold, calculating, almost as if she was sizing him up. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, but said nothing. No, you can ask for anything you like. We have chefs here who can prepare whatever you want, James continued, trying to reassure her. Don't feel like you have to settle for this. But Emma didn't respond. Instead, she looked at him, her gaze unwavering. What do you want from me, James? She asked, her voice soft but piercing, as though she were not just asking a question, but making an observation. James was taken aback. No one had ever spoken to him like that, especially not a child. I want you to feel at home, he stammered, unsure of how to respond. Do you really? She asked again, tilting her head slightly. There was something unsettling in her words, something far beyond her years. James sat back, trying to process what she was saying. This wasn't a child who needed comfort and love. This was someone who seemed to be beyond the ordinary, someone who had a wisdom that was hard to understand. She wasn't looking for kindness or reassurance. She was looking for something deeper, something he wasn't sure he could give her. The silence stretched between them, and James realized that he had no idea how to reach her. He didn't know how to connect with this girl who had been thrust into his life, and he certainly didn't understand the enigma that she seemed to be. The unease he had felt earlier grew stronger. He had made a decision to adopt Emma because he saw something in her that he couldn't explain, but now he wasn't sure what he was dealing with. The next few days only deepened his confusion. Emma didn't interact much with the staff or show any interest in the extravagant gifts and luxuries he had provided for her. She spent most of her time alone, reading in the study or sitting by the window, staring out at the world as though she were waiting for something. James tried to engage her, but each attempt was met with silence or a vague, uninterested response. One evening, as James entered his study after a long day of meetings, he found Emma sitting at his desk, flipping through a stack of papers. She was examining his company's financial reports, the same ones that James's accountants had worked on for hours. What are you doing? James asked, surprised to see her there. He hadn't expected her to show any interest in his business. She looked up from the papers, her expression unchanged. The numbers are wrong, she said quietly. Someone is taking money. James froze. It wasn't just a casual remark. She had pointed out a flaw in the report with unsettling accuracy. He walked over to the desk, his heart racing as he looked at the figures. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but as he examined the numbers more closely, his stomach dropped. She was right. Millions of dollars had been siphoned off in small amounts, too subtle for even his most experienced team to notice. How did you find this? James asked, his voice trembling. He had built his empire on trust and professionalism, but now, here was this child, this orphan, who had uncovered something his entire team had missed. I just know how to see things, Emma replied, her voice almost distant, as if she were speaking about something far beyond her years. Numbers are like patterns. They tell a story. James couldn't comprehend what she was saying. How could she possibly have spotted this? And more importantly, how did she know so much about numbers and patterns? Do you know who is doing this? He asked, his voice filled with suspicion. Emma didn't answer. Instead, she simply looked at him with her unreadable eyes. There was something about her that was unsettling, something that made James feel like he was looking at a stranger, not the child he had taken in. But he couldn't deny that she had just done something no one else could. As the night wore on, James felt a growing sense of dread. Who was this girl? And what was she really capable of? His mind raced with possibilities. One thing was certain. Emma was no ordinary child. And as much as he wanted to protect her, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Something big. As the days passed, James Mallory couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Emma than he had first realized. She was a puzzle, and he had only scratched the surface. Her unsettling behavior, her sharp intellect, and her inexplicable ability to see things others couldn't. It all felt too strange, too out of place for a girl who had been living in an orphanage her whole life. Despite his wealth, his business acumen, and his carefully constructed life, James found himself questioning everything he knew about Emma. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, James found Emma sitting outside in the garden. She was alone as usual, her small frame perched on a swing that creaked softly with the breeze. He had grown used to seeing her in moments of quiet solitude, but tonight something was different. She looked more distant, as though lost in thought, her eyes focused on the empty space ahead. James hesitated before walking toward her. He had tried so many times to talk to her, to understand her, but she always remained distant. There was a coldness to her that he couldn't explain. She didn't act like a child who had just been given a second chance at life. She didn't seem to care about the luxuries around her, the comforts he had provided. And it wasn't just that. She seemed to have a strange ability to see through the facade of his carefully crafted world, as though she understood things that even he didn't fully grasp. "Emma," James called gently, sitting down beside her on the swing. She didn't look at him, but he could feel the weight of her presence beside him. "You've been quiet lately. What's going on in that mind of yours?" She remained silent for a moment, the only sound being the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who I am." James felt a jolt of surprise. Her words were unexpected, vulnerable, something he hadn't anticipated coming from her. The walls she had built around herself had always been so strong, so impenetrable. Yet here she was, admitting something he had never imagined. "You know who you are," James replied, his voice soft and reassuring. "You're Emma, the girl I adopted. You're my daughter now, and you belong here." She shook her head slowly, her dark eyes filled with something James couldn't decipher. "I don't belong here, James. I don't belong anywhere." The words hit James harder than he expected. He had always believed that giving Emma a new life, a new home, would fix everything. But now, he wondered if it was that simple. Perhaps the truth ran much deeper than he could see. "Why do you feel that way?" James asked, his curiosity piqued. "What makes you feel like you don't belong?" Emma was silent for a long time. James waited patiently, giving her the space to share whatever it was that had been weighing on her. Eventually, she looked up at him, her eyes dark and unreadable. "Sometimes I remember things, not clearly, but bits and pieces, images, sounds, voices. A name." James frowned. "A name? Whose name?" She hesitated, as if debating whether or not to say it. Then, almost as if the name had been waiting for her to speak it, she whispered, "Blackwood." The name sent a chill through James's spine. Blackwood, the Blackwood family, the most influential, powerful family in the country. Their fortune had been vast, their name synonymous with success and wealth. But they had all died in a mysterious accident over a decade ago. The explosion at their estate had wiped out the entire family. Official reports had said no one survived, but there had always been whispers of a hidden heir, someone who had disappeared without a trace. James had heard rumors, of course, but he never thought much of them. Until now. "Blackwood," James repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you saying that you're related to them?" Emma nodded slowly. "I don't know for sure, but when I think about it, something inside me remembers. It's like the name is part of me." James's mind raced. If what Emma was saying was true, it would change everything. He had adopted her, brought her into his life, but she wasn't just an orphan. She wasn't just a poor girl with no family. She was the missing heir to the Blackwood fortune, a fortune that had been thought lost forever. He tried to process the information, but his thoughts were a whirlwind. If Emma was really a Blackwood, it would explain so much about her behavior, her intelligence, her ability to read people, her strange connection to the world. But it also raised 1,000 more questions. Who had erased her past? Why had she been hidden away in an orphanage for all these years? And more importantly, who would want to keep her from reclaiming her inheritance? "Emma," James said, his voice urgent. Do you remember anything else? Anything that could help us figure this out? She looked at him, her eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and resignation. I remember people. I remember the way they looked at me, like they knew who I was, but they didn't want me to know. James felt his heart race. It was all starting to make sense. Emma had been hidden for a reason. Someone didn't want her to find out the truth about her past. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure that the Blackwood legacy would remain buried. We need to find out more, James said firmly. This is bigger than we thought. Emma didn't respond, but James could see the fear in her eyes. She knew that finding the truth could be dangerous. She had already felt the weight of her family's legacy, the weight of being someone that powerful people didn't want to see again. I promise you, Emma, James said, taking her hand gently in his. I'll protect you. We'll get to the bottom of this together. The next morning, James set in motion a plan to uncover the truth. He reached out to his most trusted contacts, calling in favors and using every resource at his disposal. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the more he learned, the more dangerous it became. The Blackwood family's legacy was not something that would be given up easily. Someone would do anything to make sure that Emma remained in the shadows. James had no idea just how deep the conspiracy ran, but he was determined to find out, and he wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth and kept Emma safe from the forces that wanted to silence her forever. As he stared at the information he had gathered, a sense of dread washed over him. There were people out there who wanted Emma gone, and he would stop at nothing to protect her, even if it meant going up against the most powerful people in the world. In the days that followed, James Mallory became a man on a mission. The information he had uncovered about Emma's past was unsettling, to say the least. Her connection to the Blackwood family, the powerful, wealthy dynasty that had been wiped out in an explosion, was no coincidence. It seemed Emma was more than just an orphan. She was the rightful heir to one of the most influential families in the country, and someone somewhere had gone to great lengths to erase her existence. But the more James dug, the more dangerous it became. His investigation had already raised red flags. The more he learned about the Blackwood family's legacy, the more he realized how deep the conspiracy ran. The Blackwoods had been involved in a ruthless battle for power, and with their sudden and mysterious death, many believed that their fortune and business empire had simply disappeared. James had always heard rumors about a hidden heir, but he had never considered it could be Emma. The night James found out the truth, everything changed. He had called in every favor he could, reaching out to his most trusted contacts in the business world. The information they provided was a mixture of hope and dread. It was confirmed. Emma was not only the lost heir of the Blackwood family, but she also held the key to one of the largest fortunes ever amassed. It was the kind of wealth that could change everything, not just for Emma, but for the world around her. But someone was determined to stop her from reclaiming what was rightfully hers. We have to move quickly, James said, his voice tight with urgency as he stood beside Emma in the study. Someone knows who you are, and they're not going to let this go easily. Emma, who had been unusually quiet, finally looked up at him. Do you think they'll come for me? James nodded grimly. Yes. They'll try to erase you again if they can. They'll stop at nothing to keep you from claiming the Blackwood fortune. The fear in her eyes was evident, but it was overshadowed by something else, a deep, quiet determination. For the first time since she had arrived at his home, James saw something in Emma that he hadn't seen before. A fire, a strength that had been hidden beneath her silence. She wasn't just the scared girl who had lost everything. She was the Blackwood heir, and now she was ready to fight for what was rightfully hers. We won't let them win, James said, his voice firm. Within hours, James put his plan into motion. He called in a private security team, doubling the number of guards around the estate. He even hired a few discreet investigators to track down any leads that might help them uncover who was behind the plot to erase Emma's past. The more he uncovered, the darker the truth became. The Blackwood Empire hadn't just been the target of a corporate battle, it had been systematically destroyed by those who wanted to take control of its wealth and power. James knew who the culprits were. Victor Langley, the ruthless CEO of a rival company, had been at the center of it all. Langley had been one of the key players in the corporate war against the Blackwoods, and when the explosion had wiped out the entire Blackwood family, it had been his chance to swoop in and claim the fortune for himself. James had suspected something was off, but now the evidence was clear. Langley had orchestrated the fall of the Blackwood family, and he was willing to do anything to keep Emma from stepping into her rightful place. One night, as James sat at his desk studying the files, the sound of his phone ringing broke the silence. It was his lead investigator. "Mr. Mallory, we've got a problem," the investigator said, his voice urgent. "Langley's people are already here. They've been watching the estate for days. They know Emma is alive and they're making their move." James felt a cold shiver run down his spine. They had no time to waste. "Prepare the security team. We need to leave now," James ordered. "Get Emma and get to the safe house. I'll handle Langley." But Emma wouldn't be hidden away like some helpless victim. When she heard the news, she immediately protested. "No, James, I'm not running away. This is my fight too." James tried to reason with her, but he could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't the scared little girl he had first brought into his home. She was a fighter. And now, more than ever, she understood the stakes. Her family's legacy was at risk, and she wouldn't let anyone take it from her again. "Fine," James said, his voice hard, "but we do this together. We fight back." The tension in the air was palpable as James and Emma prepared for the showdown they knew was coming. As the night wore on, the mansion seemed to grow darker, more foreboding. The security cameras around the estate flickered on and off, and James's gut told him that danger was closing in. In the middle of the night, as the household slept, James's worst fears were realized. The security alarm blared, its shrill sound cutting through the silence of the mansion. James bolted upright, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He grabbed his phone and dialed the head of his security team. "They're inside." "The security officer said, his voice frantic. "We need to move fast. They've breached the perimeter." James's heart raced as he rushed down the hall to Emma's room. He reached the door just as a shadowy figure stepped into her bedroom, gloved hands reaching toward her. Without thinking, James raised his weapon and fired a shot. The man stumbled back, but instead of crying out in pain, he smirked, a cold, mocking expression. "You have no idea what you've stepped into, Mallory," the intruder hissed, his voice dripping with malice. Before James could react, the intruder threw something to the ground, and a thick cloud of smoke erupted in the room. James's vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to spin as the smoke consumed the room. He fought to stay on his feet, but the haze was overwhelming. The next few moments were a blur. When the smoke cleared, the intruder was gone, leaving only a lingering sense of danger in the air. Emma sat in her bed, wide-eyed, clutching the blankets as if trying to hold on to something solid in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. "Are you okay?" James asked, rushing to her side. She nodded slowly, but her voice trembled. "He knew me, James. He called me by my real name, Evelyn Blackwood." The realization hit James like a punch to the gut. The intruder had known exactly who she was, Evelyn Blackwood, the missing heir to the Blackwood fortune. This wasn't just an attack on Emma, it was an attack on everything she stood for. "We're not safe here anymore," James said, his voice thick with urgency. "We have to leave, now." Within hours, they were on a private jet, racing away from the mansion and the danger that lurked behind it. James knew that the fight was far from over. They were headed straight into the heart of enemy territory. But with Emma by his side, he knew they had a chance. Together, they would fight for her legacy, for her future, and they wouldn't stop until they had taken back what was rightfully hers. As the jet soared into the night sky, James's resolve hardened. The battle for the Blackwood legacy was just beginning, and he wouldn't let anyone stand in their way. Not Victor Langley, not anyone. This was Emma's fight now, and James would do whatever it took to help her win it.